We'll do it live.
Okay.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Fucking thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
They say the vote is just a smokescreen. I hope you acting like we got control over who gets chosen. I think it's a joke. The president's on dope, sniffing coke. He's just a puppet of Patsy, taking orders from a cult to the mask. He was dancing with the devil, so we can't ever trust. You got us by the balls, power, blood, money, and lust. Just take control of yourself. You know that change is a must. The initials of the U.S. is us. Before you join the military, see what the war's about. We got a lot of dirt to clean in our house.
Committed treason. It's the reason we stand and we fight through the darkness and the light. The government lied. Soldiers died in the fire of war. They got burnt. They had to learn the hard way. The freedom isn't free, so they paid the price with their life. And now you miss them. Some are still missing. This ain't the Christian coalition. I'm a child of the earth that study this knowledge without a need of a church. Of course I thank the Lord, but no thank you for the war. All of what we fighting for. It's the rich against the poor. Missiles flying overhead. Bodies coming home dead.
And I want the Iranians to know that if I'm the president, we will attack Iran. We would be able to totally obliterate them.
This is dedicated to all the suckers.
I take flight like fist fights. You see bright lights, throwing lefts and rights. I keep my jaw locked tight, swinging. Bullets singing past your head through your windows. And plastic foes, it's a rap casket close. I laugh at those who chose to get bold. When they lose a couple of souls, they crumble and fold. Now watch them hunt down, hurt, hang, and hate the hater. Watch how we rise, fall, and thank me later. Top dollar. Anybody who got a problem with us can easily be found and crushed. I'm a lush, feeling a rush. Feel the adrenaline pumping. Me and Dub and the Escalade thumping. Crazy Tune Productions, crank the amp. Limo tint down, let's track some transfer, nigga. When I walk, I'm leaving holes in the concrete exhibit.
What's up, folks? Permanent Patriot. At my newly renamed page, courtesy of Facebook. Here we have this article. Russia presented evidence against US, UK, and Israel as being the actual 9/11 terrorists. Here's my comment. It seems to me, folks, that a lot of people are missing this page. A lot of people are missing this page. There's a list of crimes. See the endless, stunning list of murders, felonies, bribes, tax fraud, voter fraud, identity fraud, climate fraud, Obamacare fraud, reparations fraud, war crimes, border treason, IRS crimes, Second Amendment violations, unconstitutional acts, illegal bailouts and takeovers, campaign crimes, over-the-top government spending abuses, and hundreds of other assorted crimes and treason perpetrated by Obama and his organized criminal administration. Did you miss that? I've even done videos about him and Bush on trial for war crimes. Apparently people thought I was kidding or missed that too. And actually I'll show you right where it is. Commie Obama. Where the fuck do we start, folks? And how many times did I tell you? The fucking US and all the fucking world governments are working together. Comprende? They're all working together. Do I really gotta go through this? Okay, let's do a little timeline. First of all, Obama was trained. Obama has somebody in Gitmo right now, which is why he doesn't close the prison. Folks, Gitmo is... Have you ever seen the movie Goodfellas? That's the kind of prison Gitmo is. Now, of course, all of these you can't take right open. But that is true, and the guy that's in there is a KGB agent. Obama tied to the Kremlin. Dick Morris. Obama gives away our sovereignty. Plans to require Russia and China to approve use of U.S. military. Like I said, our troops ain't gonna be the ones taking the guns, folks. They know that their neighbors don't want to take guns from their neighbors. Duh. That's why they gave them sheets and asked them questions. They already did questionnaires on this shit with the troops. Will you fire on American citizens? Apparently most of them said no. So, he also plans to give away our rights to sea and space. And here's his plan to take away our gun rights without going to Congress. And there you can read it. Now, communist leader advocates dumping communist label to be able to work more effectively inside the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is the Communist Party, folks. In case you haven't fucking noticed, they took over. It must have been before the 40s. Because I remember I did a video, and even I just found out then. And I was like, wow, the Democrats been in power a long fucking time. Yeah, since at least the 1940s. 1942 at least. The Democrats had the White House. Okay? It was always a communist party. Oh, here it is right here. Oops. Common socialist dream was victory over what they called corrupt American capitalism. KGB agent now locked up in Gitmo. And there's the whole story. Dude's author figures it out while doing his research. Communist Party USA reporting to Moscow. Learned Obama's mentor was an anti-American, pro-Soviet, pro-Stalin, card-carrying communist. And there's his card number. View declassified FBI file. It's right there. And don't you remember what Obama said to Putin at their little meeting? You could hear him and you could read his lips. He says, when I become president, I'll be more flexible and be able to do more stuff. So bear with me. That's what he said. I mean, folks, we can go on for fucking days with this shit. Seriously? Has anybody ever fucking been to Commie Blaster? Anybody? Has anybody fucking passed it around or shit, I don't know. Asked anybody else in the media or anything to look at it? Unreal. Here's the videos I did from... One's from October 5th and one's from October 13th, 2015. Have a nice day.
I get tired of saying that defense is to be made an excuse for wasting dollars. I don't believe we should pay 1 cent for defense more than we have to.
I seriously question an increase in the Pentagon budget in the face of the department's recent Inspector General's report. How can we seriously consider a $50 billion increase in the defense budget When DOD's own auditors say the department cannot account for $2.3 trillion in transactions in 1 year alone.
It is, I was going to say terrifying. It is such a monumental task. I have met with two former officials of the Pentagon who served in the budget and controller and those areas. And I've mused over the fact that I've read some of these things and asked what they thought.
We process nearly 10 million paychecks a month. 10 million times to get things screwed up. I've had my pay screwed up 6 times since I've been in the department. And it's really bad when you screw up your boss's pay.
Appeared before the Congressional Committee, the highest representation of the American people, under subpoena to tell what I knew of activities which I believe might lead to an attempt to set up a fascist dictatorship. The upshot of the whole thing was that I was supposed to lead an organization of 500,000 men, which would be able to take over the functions of government.
A congressional committee ultimately found evidence of a plot to overthrow Roosevelt. According to Butler, the conspiracy included representatives of some of America's top corporations, including J.P. Morgan, DuPont, and Goodyear Tire. As today's chairman of Goodyear Tire knows, for corporations to dominate government, a coup is no longer necessary.
Corporations have gone global. And by going global, the governments have lost some control over corporations. Regardless of whether the corporation can be trusted or cannot be trusted, governments today do not have over the corporations the power that they had and the leverage that they had 50 or 60 years ago. And that's a major change. So governments have become powerless compared to where they were before.
Capitalism today commands the towering heights and has displaced politics and politicians as the new high priest.
U.S. President George Bush and his former counterpart Tony Blair were found guilty of war crimes by the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal, which held a 4-day hearing in Malaysia. The 5-panel tribunal unanimously decided that Bush and Blair committed genocide and crimes against peace and humanity when they invaded Iraq in 2003 in blatant violation of international law. The judges ruled that war against Iraq by both the former heads of states was a flagrant abuse of law and an act of aggression which amounted to a mass murder of the Iraqi people.
Bush and Blair are found guilty under the same law that applied to the Nazis after the end of World War II. So they are international criminals, guilty of Nuremberg crimes against peace, and they should be prosecuted by any state in the world that gets a hold of them. And we will continue our efforts to bring Bush and Blair to justice and put them in jail.
In their verdict, the judges said that the United States, under the leadership of Bush, forged documents to claim that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. They further said the findings of the tribunal be made available to members of the Rome Statute and the names of Bush and Blair be entered into a war crimes register.
There is also a recommendation that this be circulated to states, because all states have universal jurisdiction. And therefore, whenever Bush or Blair appear within their shores, there is an obligation under international law to commit these criminals, international war criminals, through the justice system.
Both Bush and Blair have repeatedly said the so-called war against terror was targeted at terrorists.
Washington's putting intense and persistent pressure to overturn war crime sentences of other countries' commanders, reveals a top judge at The Hague. Judge Friedrich Harhoff says the White House is getting extremely nervous about its own crimes.
The court said commanders were responsible for war crimes their subordinates committed. But the chamber suddenly backtracked. The U.S. felt they were getting too close to their own commanders.
A Malaysian court already found George W. Bush and his deputies guilty of torture and war crimes. At the trial, Mahathir Mohamad, Malaysia's ex-premier, heard from victims and witnesses and was blunt.
These are basically murderers, and they kill on a large scale.
The 8 convicted were John Yoo. Newsweek reports he advised Bush that whole villages can be legally, quote, massacred. The dean of Yale Law School called J. Bybee's infamous torture memo the most erroneous legal opinion he has ever read. The National Lawyers Guild filed a complaint over William Haynes's recommendations for so-called stress positions and use of dogs against prisoners. Newsweek notes Richard Cheney's lawyer David Addington penned the key memorandum that the Geneva Convention doesn't apply to them. Alberto Gonzalez wrote that the laws against torture are, quote, obsolete and quaint. The Senate Armed Services Committee reports Donald Rumsfeld approved the, quote, aggressive techniques used in Guantanamo and black sites around the world. Richard Cheney told the Washington Times he, quote, signed off on the so-called enhanced interrogations. I don't care what the international lawyers say, we're going to kick some said Bush, notes counter-terrorism head Richard Clarke. The world's leading war crimes lawyer was on that prosecution team. Francis Boyle sent President Milosevic to The Hague in 2001. He was the first to bring an Israeli general to court for atrocities against Palestinians. Now, his lawsuits around the world against Bush are cornering him, stopping him from travel. Professor Boyle, thanks a lot for joining us. Will you get Bush and co, even if they stay at home?
Bush and the rest of them have been advised by their attorneys not to be traveling around the world. We're going to get them here, too. They killed about 1.5 million Iraqis. As for U.S. service personnel, Bush and the rest of them murdered about 5,000. That's why I think it's going to take longer, because the offenses were so grave and so extreme compared to Milosevic.
What's people's reaction to you closing in on him?
I think they'll be rejoicing in the streets when they're brought to justice here in America, and perhaps in other places in the world as well. Certainly Iraq, for what they did in Iraq. There's no question about that. I'm sure there'll be parades over there in Iraq when Bush and Cheney are brought to justice.
George W. Bush had to cancel his first trip following the admission in autobiography Decision Points that he ordered waterboarding. He shied away from Switzerland after Swiss MPs worked on a warrant for his arrest with New York's Center for Constitutional Rights. CCR Senior Attorney Catherine Gallagher joins us. Thanks a lot for coming on. Now, the common response is, oh, Bush has contacts, no one can touch him. But you work with lawmakers around the globe. Why is he now cautious of traveling anywhere?
The globe is this Convention Against Torture. So most of the globe is an obligation to investigate and punish George Bush. Actually, the Obama team reached out to Switzerland and sought assurances that George Bush wouldn't be prosecuted, and that the Swiss response was, we have an independent prosecutor and an independent judiciary. We can't make that promise to you.
Cowboy Republic, the 6 ways the Bush gang has defied the law, lists 200 pages of White House crimes. The author of that book is former head of the National Lawyers Guild, Marjorie Cohen. Thanks very much for joining us. What are the 6 ways the Bush gang defied the law?
Okay, Daniel, and I just want to say, first of all, that there are many more than 6 ways, but I had to limit it. So that's why I only chose 6, or the book would be as long as an encyclopedia. The first, and I think in some ways the most serious, is the illegal wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is a crime of aggression. Crime of aggression at Nuremberg was to be the supreme international crime. So then the second violation of the law is the torture regime that was set up by Bush officials and their legal mercenaries, John Yoo, J. Bybee, and other lawyers. Third violation is war crimes, and torture is considered a war crime as well. But the killing of civilians, the targeting of civilians, 2 of the most notorious instances of war crimes, the Haditha massacre, where U.S. Marines basically executed about 24 men, women, and children in cold blood. It was just horrific at Haditha. And then the Fallujah massacre which was done in retaliation for the killing of 4 Blackwater mercenaries, civilians were targeted. U.S. soldiers went house to house and took them out and shot them. They shot families crossing the river. Helicopters and snipers shot people. There were unknown numbers, hundreds of people that were killed in Fallujah.
God bless America! Yeah!
Then the 4th violation of the law is the prison camp that the United States maintains at Guantanamo. Then the 5th example of law breaking by the Bush administration was the illegal spying program, surveillance program, spying on Americans' conversations, and then a data mining program, very much like we've heard about lately from Edward Snowden. And then finally, the refusal to fulfill the law. When Congress would pass a law, frequently George W. Bush would sign the law and then attach what we call a signing statement saying, yes, I'm signing this law, but I am only going to follow the parts of it that I agree with. And the president cannot make the law under the U.S. Constitution. That's up to Congress.
Tomorrow, when Obama lands in South Africa, lawyers have filed for his arrest for genocide. The country that went through apartheid, attack on ethnic groups classed as inferior, charges the Obama administration's now doing the exact same thing. Indiscriminate confinement of Muslims without charge and targeted drone attacks on Muslim civilian populations around the globe. They charge worse than apartheid, in fact constitutes genocide. The Muslim Lawyers Association brought the claim to prosecutors with attorney Yusha Tayyab. He joins us. It's great to have you on. Obama now expanding the war on terror to a war on whistleblowers and using drones over US soil. You note, as with apartheid, discrimination is spiraling out of control.
It's a history that our people know, and so it's something we can identify with, and that is particularly pertinent to the South African community because, as you know, pre-94 we had extensive detention without trial in this country, and the comparative to the South African public is you didn't condone it then, why must you allow it to happen on an international basis now? And so this is a genocide, a torture, a perpetuated campaign against people of the Muslim faith. One of the judges in a Pakistani High Court judgment that we've attached to our complaint has declared the drone attacks to be illegal and has asked the UN to investigate it. He seems to want to joke about the drone attacks. He's recorded as having said at one of his balls held in the US that if any person's had designs on his daughters, he's got predator drones.
But boys don't get any ideas. I have 2 words for you. Predator drones. You will never see it coming. You think I'm joking?
At last week's G8 in Ireland, MP Claire Daly says corporate media should stop pretending Obama's anything but a war criminal.
By any serious examination, this man is a war criminal. He has just announced his decision to supply arms to the Syrian opposition, including the jihadists, fueling the destabilisation of that region and continuing to undermine secularism and knock back conditions for women. And to hell with the thousands more who lose their lives, or the tens of thousands more who will be displaced as this war goes on. This is the man who has facilitated a 200% increase in the use of drones, which have killed thousands of people, including hundreds of children.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
His administration, the Washington Post says, has in fact been the most secretive since Nixon, classifying 92 million documents a year. That's even more than Bush. Former intelligence officer Scott Rickard is investigating secret, disastrous wars American people are waging in their name and funding and don't even know about. Thanks a lot for joining us. Tell us about those wars and why have they been a disaster?
What people don't realize is that there's been a war for 4 years. They fought a war down through Sudan and Ethiopia and into Somalia. And then they tell us in the news that there's been a terrible drought and 250,000 people have died. When in fact, what had happened is that all the food supply and all the water supply was basically wiped out. And so they're left to die in the desert because now they're going and developing the oil fields in this new country created South Sudan. And then when it comes to war crimes using weapons of mass destruction, I mean, the depleted uranium-lined Hellfire missiles, and this is a fact, they're fired from Predator and Reaper drones. They deliver at least 10 kilograms of depleted uranium, which permanently contaminates the target areas. So when you go back in there, you're guaranteed, if you spend too much time, to get some form of horrific cancer that will kill you between 10 and 15 years. That's how poisonous this stuff is. And we've got a lot of our soldiers around this stuff that are dying, but they don't talk a lot about it. It's like our generation's Agent Orange.
Ordinarily, we don't do a question 2 days in a row, but this is important enough to be an exception. The House just passed President Bush's bill to redefine the treatment of detainees, and the Senate's expected to do the same thing tomorrow. Buried deep inside this legislation is a provision that will pardon President Bush.
I doubt, to be honest, that people inside the department are going to be capable of sorting this out. I have a feeling it's going to take some folks from outside to come in and look at this and put in place a process that over a period, and I regret to say, but I've seen how long things take, I think it's going to take a period of years to sort it out. I think it'll probably take the cooperation of the Congress to try to get the system so that you can actually manage the financial aspects of that institution rather than simply report on things that have happened imperfectly.
There's more oversight over the Head Start program than there is over the entire military budget. It's a terrible record, and it's preposterous that the Defense Department doesn't know what's happened to this money.
This situation's a disgrace. It tells me that we can't meet our constitutional obligations to the taxpayers of our country to make sure that things are honestly and legally spent.
We're told major cuts in education programs, and then we read, well, you know, $500 million is paid per year that isn't owed.
It is an incredible thing that we arm the world and then turn around and come to Congress and say, look at all these weapons out there. They're almost superior to ours. They're comparable to ours. Well, of course they are. They're ours. We sold them to them.
Since the end of the Cold War, we've sold more military weapons than the rest of the world combined.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
My name is Jack Shanahan, Vice Admiral, U.S. Navy, retired. One of our nuclear bombs blows up Hiroshima 15 times over. 5 devastates Russia. After that, this is how many the U.S. has left. I feel safe reducing nuclear weapons. Do you?
You can roughly locate any community somewhere along a scale running all the way from democracy to despotism. This man makes it his job to study these things.
Well, for one thing, avoid the comfortable idea that the mere form of government can of itself safeguard a nation against despotism.
That's what you get when you loot.
Later, the car's owner told us, I'm a taxi driver. The car was my livelihood.
For those of you who don't know, it is illegal to shoot into a mosque unless you were taking fire from it. There was no fire that was taken from that mosque. It was shot into because we were angry.
Oh, so cute, little puppy. Oh, a trip. Oh. That's mean. That was mean, Matari.
Oh yes! Oh yes! You're gonna get it! Yes! Naughty little boys! Yes! 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 Yes!
Yes, these men and their hypnotized followers call this a new order. It is not new, and it is not order.
I keep my jaw locked tight swinging, bullets singing past your head through your windows and plastic foes. It's a rap casket close. I laugh at those who chose to get bold. When they lose a couple of souls, they crumble and fold. Now watch them hunt down, hurt, hang, and hate the hater. Watch how we rise, fall, and thank me later. Top dollar. Anybody who got a problem with us can easily be found and crushed. I'm a lush, feeling a rush, feel the adrenaline pumping. Me and Dub and the Escalade thumping. Crazy Tune Productions, crank the amp. Limo tent down, let's track some transfer, nigga. When I walk, I'm leaving holes in the concrete exhibit.
What's up, folks? Permanent Patriot. At my newly renamed page, courtesy of Facebook. Here we have this article. Russia presented evidence against US, UK, and Israel as being the actual 9/11 terrorists.
President committed treason. It's the reason we stand and we fight through the darkness and the light. The government lied. Soldiers died in the fire of war. They got burnt. They had to learn the hard way. The freedom isn't free, so they paid the price with their life. And now you miss them. Some are still missing. This ain't the Christian coalition. I'm a child of the earth that study this knowledge without a need of a church. Of course I thank the Lord, but no thank you for the war. All of what we fighting for. It's the rich against the poor. Missiles flying overhead. Bodies coming home dead.
And I want the Iranians to know that if I'm the president, we will attack Iran. We would be able to totally obliterate them.
This is dedicated to all the I take flight like fist fights. You see bright lights throwing lefts and right.
Missed that too. And actually, I'll show you right where it is. Commie Obama. Where the fuck do we start, folks? And how many times did I tell you? The fucking US and all the fucking world governments are working together. Comprende? They're all working together. Do I really gotta go through this? Okay, let's do a little timeline. First of all, Obama.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Fucking thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
We no hope. You acting like we got control over who gets chosen. I think it's a joke. The president's on dope, sniffing coke. He's just a puppet, a patsy, taking orders from a cult to the mask. He was dancing with the devil, so we can't ever trust. You got us by the balls, power, blood, money, and lust. Just take control of yourself. You know that change is a must. The initials of the U.S. is us. Before you join the military, see what the war's about. We got a lot of dirt to clean up.
My comment. It seems to me, folks, that a lot of people are missing this page. A lot of people are missing this page. There's a list of crimes. See the endless, stunning list of murders, felonies, bribes, tax fraud, voter fraud, identity fraud, climate fraud, Obamacare fraud, reparations fraud, war crimes, border treason, IRS crimes, Second Amendment violations, unconstitutional acts, illegal bailouts and takeovers, campaign crimes, over-the-top government spending abuses, and hundreds of other assorted crimes and treason perpetrated by Obama and his organized criminal administration. Did you miss that? I've even done videos about him and Bush on trial for war crimes. Apparently people thought I was kidding, or